is David Caleb. Очень приятно, Mr. Maltsev.
Спасибо.
Thank you. I'm from St. Petersburg, not the one that you know, the one that I know, just a few miles from here. I'm a doctor in St. Pete to write about medical fascism, which is actually occurring in America. The question I have for both of you, please, is I'm more and more convinced of the theory that there is a shadowy group of people that are running lots of the globalism, who are running our Federal Reserve and the central banks and taking the money for themselves and getting the first bite at the money before it starts to cause inflation. I would like to challenge both of you to put names and faces to those people, and that's not easy, with price tags and networks that go along with those individuals and help us expose them. Do you think that is achievable, and are you up to the task?
I'll repeat what the main narrative of my address was about. This is not a few wayward individuals. The entire culture has been corrupted. All of the kinds of conspiracies you've insinuated could be exposed through subpoena power and otherwise by Congress tomorrow if they wanted it. And the voters right in this room and elsewhere could vote out members of Congress who didn't force that kind of scrutiny. And I think we are missing the boat if we try to focus on this not as, that we focus on this as individual wrongdoing and crassness rather than something that's far deeper. That's why you find, for instance, the elections, is like the French say, the more things change, the more they stay the same. It's because the personalities may be different, policies and the underlying motivations are constant. That's what needs to be changed.
And I was blessed by the opportunity to know and work with Murray Rothbard. He was a great economist and a great, very fun-loving person. And he used to say, Yuri, I'm not a follower of conspiracy theories. But conspiracies happen all the time, left and right, mostly left. That's what he would say. And I would say that maybe that's right, that it's difficult to put names on that, but some names are definitely well known. We can read them even in New York Times. That would be, again, the same people. That would be Geithner, that would be Krugman, that would be George Soros, that would be Warren Buffett, that would be other people who are feeding off the government largesse and trying to make it even more affordable for them.
But all I'd say, Yuri, is that those are known. The reason why they're occupying office is not because they've foisted themselves on us. They're there through the democratic process that the American people know about and are permitted. Part of the Ron Paul campaign has said you were misguided. There's an alternative here. It's not like this is a secret cabal that we don't know who are making these decisions that we agree are misguided. The other observation that I'd like to make, and this is a little bit beyond the direct question, but it's response to some of the things Yuri said, that I don't think the Founding Fathers can be faulted for not identifying what Yuri has pointed out are defects in socialism, in some sense the thrust of democracy to try to appease voters in exchange for some kind of government stipends, benefits, or whatever. In fact, that's why the Founding Fathers did not authorize an income tax. It came about by an amendment. That's why the Founding Fathers put in a clause making it unconstitutional to impair the obligation of contracts. It was there precisely to address these whimsies of pure, simple majorities to try to manipulate government for their financial advantage. The problem isn't that these problems were not foreseen. And indeed, we remember about James Madison, Federalist 10, he anticipated this idea of breaking class warfare, and he said, no, what we've got to do is to recognize factions and have ambition counteract ambition, and that's how he tried to diffuse the power in the constitutional dispensation that emerged from Philadelphia. The problem is we haven't honored the Constitution. It's a homonym of what it used to be. It sounds the same, but we interpret it differently to accommodate the cultural compromises we have made in our own values.
I have one question for each of you. Bruce, can you give us an update on the status of the lawsuit that you filed for Obama's war in Libya and what the likelihood of having an impact is? And Yuri, can you just describe to us if there was any kind of anti-war movement in the Soviet Union during the Russian invasion of Afghanistan. I'd be curious. Thank you.
The lawsuit, there were 10 members of Congress in their individual capacity who were the plaintiffs suing President Obama. Basically, there are two theories of violation. One, that he usurped the exclusive authority of Congress to commence war by the bombing in Libya. And secondly, that he's expended money in support of the war that has not been properly authorized by Congress. That makes this challenge a little bit different than previous ones. Now, I had a friend in Congress. His name was Tom Campbell. It may be a name known to you. He represented California in the House of Representatives for many years, and he lost a Senate bid against Carly Fiorina the last time around in 2010. But Tom also brought a lawsuit against then President Clinton over the undeclared war in Bosnia. You may recall in that instance, the president actually sought a declaration of war. When it was voted down by the Congress of the United States, he decided he had authority to continue the war in any event. But Tom had lost that case because the court said, you are seeking to vindicate an institutional prerogative of Congress, not an individual member. And since Congress as an institution isn't the plaintiff, we aren't going to address the case. That's the problem. We do not yet have a response from the government, but I'm sure they will file a motion to dismiss based on the theory that there is no standing of the individual members. Congress has lacked the backbone to pass a resolution to authorize the entire House to sue. It was something that was done in an alternate form during the Watergate crisis when the Senate did authorize the Senate to sue President Nixon in various and sundry capacities. They did have standing. Now, the second kind of defense that we anticipate is the one that perhaps is more surreal. We have the legal advisor at the State Department's name is Harold Koh. Harold Koh was formerly dean at the Yale Law School. And at one time, he understood checks and balances. I testified on a panel with Mr. Koh for the Senate Judiciary Committee in 2006 against the Military Commissions Act that suspended habeas corpus and vandalized due process of law, and he was on that panel, very critical. But he has testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee most recently that we are not even involved in hostilities in Libya. We're not involved in hostilities, even though our Secretary of Defense at a congressional hearing said, of course, if anyone launched a Tomahawk missile into New York City, we would incinerate them, because that would be an act of war. But our sending Predator drones and missiles and bombing Libya isn't hostilities. Because, he said, that we don't have any ground troops and our pilots are flying high enough, they don't risk being shot down by anti-aircraft missiles. So I said, well, suppose we launched nuclear weapons from ICBMs in the United States and incinerated everything that breathes in Libya. Then we're not in hostilities, right? No foot soldiers, no pilots in danger. I said, right. I said, that is the Orwellian discourse that now goes as serious constitutional discussion. And I imagine that is what they will argue, that in Libya, it's not a war. Only if they shoot at us.
So the other question was about the peace movement in the war the Soviets conducted in Afghanistan. Well, I would say that many of us do not realize that the Soviet war in Afghanistan was actually a prelude to 9/11. That Soviets destabilized that country. I've been to Afghanistan, I think in 1976. It was a pretty kind of rustic place, sleepy and dusty, and a lot of flies, very nice people, very calm. And then they destabilized this all. They murdered, not many people also realize that they murdered 1.5 million people out of the population of 20 million. And they made all these orphans, whom later Bin Laden would get into madrasas paid by the US taxpayers. And so that's how it destabilized it. In the Soviet Union at that time, peace movement would be only official peace movement. It would be run by the Communist Party. And the peace movement was that we should dissolve the UN, we should keep ourselves in a pretty good shape. So it's peace movement was the same, I would say, the same as global warming today. In the 1980s, Soviet peace movement was trying to introduce socialism by the means of condemning imperialistic wars all over the world. So that's it's not that, I mean, there were imperialistic wars. However, Soviet intentions and Soviet motives were completely different from what, for example, a libertarian person in the United States would do.
Can I just make an observation about the question itself? Again, the use of the term anti-war, because I think that's how our opponents manipulate imagery and words to our disadvantage. And no one's suggesting we're not willing to fight for our defense. Anti-war creates an image of weakness and pacifism, dove as opposed to hawk. Really, what we're about is defense, not preemptive warfare. And I think our slogan needs to be millions for defense, not 1 cent for empire and preemptive warfare. That's the motive. It's not that we're weak and not willing to fight for something, but it's in defense, not to dominate other people. And that's critical if we're going to win this campaign of ideas, because we know people respond to images evoked by words, that we have to be very careful on how we phrase what we're about.
All right, well, we're going to take a short break now. Let's make it 3:10. It was supposed to be 3:05. Let's make it 3:10, 30, come back, and then both these authors will be out in the alcove to